Good morning to everyone, and this is the Monday, the 29th of April, 2024. See how alert I am, Pat, to every moment. I know
Yeah,
exactly
God,
where we
you're
are,
on the
what's
ball
happening.
this morning. Yes, yeah.
Well, I give them the
Yeah.
headlines as well. The headlines are
Go for it.
the press against refugees or immigrants coming from the north to the south, and why Richie Sunak is saying it's a direct result of his policy. There's some people in Dublin who have their children at Bunskull, Irish medium primary schools, but now can't get a secondary Irish medium secondary school for them, and they feel they're being deprived. And there's we'll just add one other one, and that is what's the right age to give a child a smartphone? Because there's an awful lot of moral panic about that, I think. Okay, Pat, let's start with the Helen McEntee thing. You said, incidentally, that Helen McEntee, because of this whole furore about immigrants, that she had to leave her home. Is that correct?
Yeah, that seems to be what happened to apparently she wasn't home, but her husband and her children were moved out. I think it was Friday or Saturday. I'm not 100% sure. They got a threatening phone call, and apparently it's a second or third, and the Gardaí are taking it serious, so they were moved out for security reasons. Now, Jude, it is becoming a nasty issue and so on. And it's this whole thing of immigration is starting like what was the last day I was in County Wicklow where the guards actually went in and arrested people, which is a change in tactics because up until now they haven't really engaged that much. But they were claiming,
Pat, can I just
yes,
one thing? That thing about we moved out of our house, or her husband and children we moved out.
yeah.
I think that's a bit odd. Because what would you do? Where would you put them? Do they go to a relative or something? And would they be staying over there for several days? Or
I presume they moved to like somewhere like a hotel overnight, shoot, or something like that too, where they checked out the house, you
that's
know.
sort of it's
Uh,
but I remember, Pat, in the 60s, 1960s, I used to walk
yeah,
to my place, my bed sit, and it would take me past Garrett Fitzgerald's house. And
yeah,
invariably, when he was Taoiseach, there were a couple of guards standing at the gate, standing at the
yeah,
entrance to it. Would that not be a hell of a lot cheaper than
yeah.
getting people out? I have a funny
Well,
feeling, that might be being played for political ends as well. I had to leave my house.
Jude, I can't answer. Just that they said
Mm,
this is the second or third time. But you
well,
know, there's a sort of a nasty thing that's coming on this right wing. In fact, I heard a local politician in Donegal on this morning, and I need to listen to it again because I'm not
yeah.
exactly sure what the point is. But they're all calling for, let's clamp down on these immigration, clamp down on this. Dude, the one in Limerick last week, just to go back over it, was the fact that I think there were 6 people arrested. The Garda said people are quite entitled to protest peacefully, but they're not entitled to throw rocks at things. And Garda cars were damaged, and I think a couple of policemen allegedly were injured, and so on. There's a place, Trubber House or something it's called in Wicklow, and they were doing it up allegedly for the housing of asylum seekers.
Mm.
Now, the people who are protesting said the Gardaí were very heavy-handed, so you've got the usual sort of thing going on there. But anyway, what I'm saying is this whole immigration debate is hotting up big time.
It
That's
is.
really what I'm saying.
Well, here's a suggestion as to how it might be cooled down a bit. The people who are creating the ruckus, as you say, throwing rocks or threatening people in their homes or damaging police cars, they're doing so because they would argue that there are far too many immigrants coming in, and that local people are, suffering as a result of it. Wouldn't it be a simple and straightforward thing for the government to do to give us the facts and figures? How many people are coming in? How many are here? And then give us a map that would indicate where most of them have been positioned or placed, and let
Yeah,
people, a lot of this, I think, comes from people say, oh God, there's an awful lot of immigrants, will be swamped. They don't know what they're talking about. They're just going by the impression they got that morning, maybe. I think
yeah,
I understand the fears of immigration because it's something different, and you feel it's going to change things, and you feel you'll somehow be crowded into a corner, and there'll be dangerous men, especially from abroad, around. But I think if the facts of the matter are laid available to people, then justification these people have for going on the offensive and attacking the police or intimidating politicians, that'll be gone, and the public will approve of them being dealt with firmly. Don't you think?
Yeah. Jude, you're right to a certain extent, and because it's based on sort of, what would you say, anecdotal evidence, and it's based on
Yeah.
maybe empirical evidence. Right. Give you an example. I grew up in Letterkenny. It's a small town. It's not so small anymore, of course. But anyway, when I grew up, it was monoculture. Everybody was white. The only people who were different were the Catholics and the Protestants. I was in about a 95% Catholic town, and the other
Yeah.
5% were Protestant. That was about the only difference. And you couldn't tell the difference between them when they were walking down the street, obviously.
Yeah.
So, like, it was basically a monoculture society. We're all white,
Yeah.
well, not English, but white Christians. Right. On Saturday evening, I happened to be up in the county. I was visiting my brother, and I was going down the main street, and as I drove down, there's two or three, what we say, seats on the main street, the sort of like armchair, not
Aye.
armchair,
Aye.
the public seating.
Yeah.
And every public seating, there was three or four black men sitting chatting.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, the difference between when I was there, well, oh, yeah, I have no objection to this, none at all. But the point of what I'm sort of saying, if you wanted to make sort of something out of it, you could say, oh, look, we're getting inundated with black people and getting foreigners and all that sort of stuff. Now, um, I don't know. See, this whole thing, right? Let's move on a bit. There's a big row going on now between Helen McENTee, the Minister for Justice,
Yeah.
and James Cleverly over in London. They were supposed to meet today, but it's called off. And apparently it's a real diplomatic spat. And there's an election coming up, and everybody's saying the Britons are playing it. But the bottom line of it all was that Rishi Sunak went on yesterday and was asked about it on Sky. They're claiming that 80% of people who are presenting themselves now at the immigration centres in Ireland, I know that for getting their papers, are saying they're coming in through Northern Ireland. And rather than sort of playing this down, Sunak says, "Oh, there's the proof. Our Rwanda problem, our plan is a deterrent. They're being switched over to Ireland now, so the Irish government is taking real exception to that. In other words, we're not going to be a loophole for your problem." You
I
know?
heard that it was a fairly robust comeback. But tell me
Yeah.
this: how do they know? How do they know that these immigrants are crossing the border from the north? Are they seeing them coming, or are they what?
No, Jude, apparently when they present, so far when they present themselves at the office,
Yeah.
this International Protection Center,
Yeah.
you have to present, the only way you can get aid, like for food and
Yes. Yes.
accommodation is to
Right.
present yourself at this International Protection Office. And apparently when they asked them, how'd you come here? You came through Belfast. They're saying 80% of them. But now, by the way, Helen McEntee apparently today is working with her officials in Dublin, and apparently she will be putting to cabinet tomorrow emergency legislation proposals that will send back these people. The minute they present at the office, sorry, you left a safe country. You're not coming here now,
Uh,
because Jude, I'm not sure about the legalities, but we have a common travel aid area with
that's
Britain,
right. That's
and
right.
up until now, I think it's. But I think they're going to say, look, from here on in, if you present yourself, you came here illegally, well, we will send you back. Now, I don't know whether they're going to send them back to their country of origin or to Britain. I'm not sure, but I think it's to the UK. They're going to send them back.
But you see, I think at the back of this is, I think, politics at work. I mentioned whenever you said about Helen McEntee or her family or husband having to be moved out, I take
Yeah,
that with a pinch of salt. They didn't have to be moved out. I bet if we put a couple of guards on duty there, that would solve the thing. They'd probably be cheaper for a start. I also think that this whole thing about people coming from the north into the south, you immediately say, oh, we'll have to stop that. And then you say, well, how do we stop that? Oh, geez, we'll have to have a border again. There are a lot of
yeah,
people would be dancing on the streets to hear that.
oh
Now,
yeah,
it seems to me that the answer is so blindingly obvious that people coming in should be checked not as they cross the border, a land border, but check them at the airports and check them at the seaports. And they either have a British passport or they have an Irish passport, and that's how the common travel area works. If people don't have either of those, then deal with them one way or another. If they're legitimate people who are able to come in, fine. If they're not, they've got to go back. Then they don't get
yeah.
in. I think that makes a lot more sense than trying to run around with a net, a butterfly net to try to catch these people.
No, your one point you're making there, like, Jude, I'd love to know the facts and the figures, for all this. And so far, I don't think anybody's
Yeah.
provided them. And there's and there, like, how many people know that says 80% are coming through? Like, what, 80% of what? Is it 10 people? How
Yeah.
many is it?
How do they
And
know?
so.
How do they know? Are they saying, are they going by the word of these people when they come, to present their papers? Do
Yeah.
they say, oh, I came in from Belfast?
Yeah, I think that's what they're sort of saying at the minute. But you look at the other thing. Right. There's a 2 or 3 day. Right. I'll give you an example of the things are working at the minute. Uh, I had a car needs a wee bit, and I have a local sort of mechanic one day, and I went to see him, and I says to him, "Hey, can you fix me car?" He looked around. He says, "Pat, come back next week." I says, "What? Next week?" He says, "I should just look at how many cars I have to fix here." I says, "Why don't you get yourself some extra staff?" He says, "Pat, not a hope." He says, "We can get nobody." I was talking to another guy, a sort of a handyman, and he said he could easily take on 2 people. This guy does painting and decorating and sort of small jobs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he's so much work on that he could easily take on 2 people. Nobody available. And there's the other thing. I had a friend of mine was in hospital last week, and he said very simply, if tomorrow morning, and he called them, the brown and black people were moved out. He says most of the doctors were definitely not Irish. He says a lot of the nurses and a lot of the others, I don't know, ancillary staff, whatever you want to call them. So he says, see this idea that we can do without these people as ridiculous.
Oh, I agree.
There's a lot of sort of stupidity about this whole
There
immigration
is.
thing,
For sure, for sure. And I take that point that the health service depends north and south on, it does depend, it would fall apart if you didn't have people from India, people from Africa, and so on. But you're back to your mechanic guy. He says, I've got loads of custom, but I can't handle it all, and
Yeah,
I've got to put it on a waiting list.
absolutely.
Surely among the people that you glimpsed in Letterkenny or wherever, if you were to check their backgrounds, there must be some of those people who are in fact mechanics or capable of becoming mechanics, or their
Absolutely.
their skills should be put into practice, so they should be given an opportunity, and that would remove this terrible fear people have. I think it's hugely exaggerated, but this fear they have of these big black guys or these big
Yeah,
brown
yeah.
guys hanging
Uh,
around and waiting to do, some mischief.
yeah.
Um,
Jude, I've no doubt about that. I listened to, I think it was an RT last Monday. There was a Ukrainian woman somewhere down south, I don't remember where. She set up a business, and I asked her, would she want to go home? She's not really. She's, if I can stay here, I'm going to stay here. Dude, that woman's contributing to society. She set up a business. She's employing 3 or 4 people. Uh, a lot of the people who from Poland and Eastern Europe are, a lot of them did apprenticeships. They're superb at metalwork, and some of them this electrical work, and I think there's a couple of electrical engineering places around here that employ a large number of Eastern Europeans, because they've gone for, we went down the Latin and Greek and academic, they went down the plumbers and woodwork and
yeah,
electricians, and
yeah.
they a lot of them are very skilled and sort of the vocations rather than professions.
And when we think of the children of immigrants, many of these are families that are coming in. I know for a
Yeah,
fact in the north, and I'm sure it's even more so in the south, that there have been schools, primary schools, that have been saved by the influx
yeah,
of children from
absolutely.
abroad, because the school that wasn't viable with the numbers they had now is viable. And the same thing
Yeah,
applies actually to the church, the Catholic Church in the north. I know about the south, but I mean, many of
yeah,
these people are very devout Catholics. And
yeah,
the pews, the seats that were bare of people are now filled with people like that. I mean, there
yeah,
are so many things, so many ways in which these people are a boon, a gift to us. And I can't
yeah.
understand that they aren't harnessed and used
Jude, I
effectively.
remember very, very clearly. There was a guy on. He was on RT in the afternoon. I think it might have been the Ray Darcy show, or it might have been even one of the news shows. But anyway, it doesn't matter. There's 2 guys on. They were from Syria. This is about 4 years ago. One was a vet, and the other was a pharmacist, and they were sitting in direct provision somewhere. And it was during the COVID thing, in the early days of the COVID thing. they both said, look, we could actually be useful members of society here. And they were willing to do whatever it was that, but some sort of examination or cross over and so on. There was no avenue open to them to do that. And instead of that, they were sitting all day looking at, Jude, they were Aleppo or something. They got out of bombs. They didn't come here because they wanted to give up their lives, but they could have been useful members of society.
Mhm.
Had we some sort of pathway for them to do that?
Mhm.
A lot of people are sitting around, maybe actually getting into trouble, bored out of their skulls. If we
Yeah.
had a sort of, and I don't know how all this sort of works, but I'm sure there must be somebody with the brains to work out. Hey, if these people are sitting here and they're qualified either as doctors, pharmacists, vets, mechanics, whatever, get them. There must be a way of getting them into the
Of
workforce.
course there is. Of course there is. Even on a small scale, that could be done. People coming in could be asked to fill in forms, and what's your background? Where are you working? What were you working at? Just to know that, and then where the need arose.
Surely, if somebody's a qualified pharmacist, the Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland should bring them up and sort of say, right, here's 10 questions. We'll sit in the room now. If you can answer these, you're passed.
Yeah. It just sort of baffles me that we create a problem. Well, we see immigration as a problem, and to a great extent, it could be a benefit. It could be a benefit in certain ways, certainly. Just one last thing.
Just to digress for 2 seconds, when I was coming up from Buncrana this morning, I was flicking between the stations. I was listening to HELEN, RT, and Nolan. Switch over to, and Ben Habib was on, and Jude. I take it Ben Habib
Oh,
as
spare me,
some.
Pat, spare me. Not Ben
No, no,
Habib
I just want
at
to
this
make
hour
this
of the
point, Jude.
morning.
I take Ben Habib as not Caucasian. I take it he's not. I take it his relatives were not born in England. And to listen, to sort of go listening to, like his politics are on the gutter, and I really mean that. And he can sue me if he likes it. There's sort of an intolerance of immigrants and asylum seekers that I find actually unbelievable.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, that's a quite a common feature. I mean, have you checked out what Suella Braverman has been saying?
That's amazing.
And Nigel
What they call it,
Farage.
uh, sure, Braverman makes Nigel Farage seem like a.
It's ridiculous. One last point to make, Pat, is of course on Thursday of this week there's local elections in Britain.
Yeah, I know that's.
Is there European elections as well? I'm not certain about that.
There's European elections down south, I think, in June.
Aye, but there's elections in the UK, in Britain on Thursday. What local elections? I wonder, there isn't the European elections then too?
No, sure, they're Brexit. They don't have a European elections anymore.
Geez, that's right. I forgot about that. Very good. But there is local elections, and when you see Sunak coming on and saying, "Look, my Rwanda policy is really working like a dream. All the ones in the north of Ireland are going down to the south." Remember, he has an election later this week, and he is essentially saying, "Look, I'm going to save you from all these invading hordes with my clever policies. So please put your tick against a Conservative candidate when you go into the local elections." I know that. Enough of that. Let's go on to something good. I was on this links. It's got to do with fluency in Irish. I was on YouTube, and I came across an old interview with De Valera.
Yeah.
And it was very detailed and very clear, black and white, but you really could see close-ups and so on. And two things he emphasized. Now, they may not, in fact, have been borne out in practice, but two things he emphasized. One was Irish unity. He said, the 6 separated counties up there, we clearly would want to change that, and it would be a simple matter. They could continue with the present devolved parliament up there, and the central powers could be transferred to Dublin and the Dáil, as distinct from Westminster, which actually made a lot of sense. And he talked about national unification and the border and partition for longer than I have ever heard any Taoiseach or president talk about it since. And that was back, I'm sure that was done back in the 1930s or 40s at the most. The other thing he talked about was Irish speaking. And he said himself that he wasn't an expert Irish speaker, but he was totally behind the drive to revive the language. Now, I don't think he made much of a fist of it, really, because most people who grew up during his reign, as it were, in the South hated Irish. So it didn't really work out. But at present, there's quite well, in the North, there's definitely a groundswell of people wanting to learn Irish, including myself. But in the South, there are, I think around Dublin, there's something like 5 bun schools, 5 primary schools, right? That is Irish medium education. There is no man's school or secondary school. And they're saying we really should have it, because if you're going to keep kids fluent, make them properly fluent, it's got to go from play school through to at least 6th form. What do you think is, first of all, do you think that'd be a good thing? Is it important, or is it just a little additional? Or
I absolutely believe if people like I think you're referring to as the Irish Times, a wee fella called Fun Cremin. His mother
that's
had a
right.
story in
Yes,
today.
yes.
Yeah. What she's saying, he went to the NANRA and then he went to the Bun School, and now and she says he's fluent in the language. He loves it. She says it's a strange thing. She says he's very aware of the cultural value of it for a wee fella, and she says very much, and he loves the whole thing about the language. And she says in Dublin, where there's about 40 different languages, it's great that a wee fella can speak his own. But the problem is now that he's reached a level. Now there's, I think it's 42 secondary schools in that area, or in the Dublin area, but there's no man school, a secondary school for him to go to now. So he's going to have to go to an English speaking school. Now, some of the English speaking schools have wee departments where they sort of do it through Irish, but it's very, very small, and I'm not even sure that's even a feature anymore. But the bottom line of it, Jude, is you see that. Can I explain? There's a man school not too far from me in Buncrana, and as economically, it's beyond a joke. Like there's nearly a full staff for about 30 pupils, and it's been going for about, I don't know, many 10, 15 years. Now, culturally and politically and socially, you can argue that it's worthwhile, but economically, and the other secondary school down there, Cranach College, is, I would say, if you talk to the principal or talk to the staff down there, they're sort of saying, we're being denied absolutely vital staff and resources so this other place can be kept open, and it's not fair for our people. So there's a whole argument about the economics of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. The fact that in a way they're in contention or in contesting to see which will get the pupils. Certainly the man's school in Belfast here, and I think there's a couple of others throughout the north. They tend to get good results. It's not just that they're good at Irish. They do say that they come out with good, not degrees, but awards in GCSE and A level and that kind of thing. And that's the sort of thing that would be very attractive to people, that they'd know that their children were being equipped for life and jobs and qualifying for college and so on. And at the same time, they were developing this absolute fluency in Irish. And the fact of the matter is, see, when you get older, Pat, but you'll find this out when you get a bit older, your head gets hardened. You can't take in stuff the way you could when you were younger. And learning a language is about 10 times as difficult as when you would have been, 10 or 11 or 12 years of age. And I've been in bun schools about Belfast, and I tell you now, it really is a delight. Like I was in the principal's office one day, and a kid came in and talked in Irish to the principal, and then he cleared off, and I said, "What was that about?" He said, he's just asking, "Can you go to the toilet?" And it was something amazing. Here was a kid totally at ease, talking this language, using it for a very functional reason. And here was me, a big stooge, and judging teaching qualities, and not able to understand a bloody word of what he's saying. I really feel ashamed of myself, but in a way, the way it was taught was to blame as well. Anyway, what about
I think it's only about 3.5% of people go through to secondary school, full Irish language secondary school. Isn't that a very small percentage?
That's really tiny. That's really tiny. I wonder why are the political parties afraid to push it in case there'd be a backlash against them? Because there is a sort of a subterranean what would you call it? Not anger, but resentment among many people in the South. Would that be true about having to learn Irish?
What do you mean, Jude? Sorry, I don't,
About
I'm
having
not
to
following
learn
you. What do you mean?
Irish, are there many people, say your age and younger, right, who would
Yeah.
be resentful of Irish, the way it's sort of foisted on people? It certainly used to be the case. You had
Oh
a
yeah, Jude.
whole lot of
I went.
jobs, or
Yeah, in fact, when I went to St. John's for the first year, all subjects were taught through Irish. Dude, that meant I was so bad at Irish. That meant I was illiterate in history, geography, maths, and everything else because I didn't understand what they were teaching me. But
mm,
anyway, we switched to English. I think in the second year, and that was, and now I was starting to try and build a house halfway up, but at least I succeeded in passing my exams just about.
yeah.
Anyway, bottom line of it, Jude, no, there was that compulsory thing and the dread of feeling Irish, and then there was a resentment. You know, if you came from a Gaelic area or you're good at Irish, well, there
Mm.
are people who are morons and other things, but they were good at Irish, and suddenly they were getting into the civil service. Hey, my favorite story about that was Terry Wogan's famous one. He says he went to RTE, and he says well, he worked with this fella called Liam Murphy, Wally Murphy, and he says they worked together for a couple of years. Wogan went off to BBC Two and disappeared. And then he says he came back to Dublin a couple of years later, and he said he turned on the RT, and he says this guy whose career had been sort of very limited suddenly was Liam O'Murray, and he was a top star. And he says suddenly he realized he thought he should have changed his name no to Terence O'Wogan. He
Well,
says, and he realized,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
noticed that on the credits in RT. There are very many of the people, their names are in Irish, and I have mixed feelings on it. Part of my cynical half says their names are in Irish because they think that'll make them look better on the national broadcaster, and another
yeah, I
part of
think
me
there's an element of truth that.
well, another part of me thinks, good on them, you know. Why
Yeah,
wouldn't you have your name in Irish?
yeah.
Why wouldn't you be proud of the fact that there is an Irish version and you could use it? I wish to God, if I had my life to live again, I think I would have changed my name to Irish at about the age of 20.
I same here, Jude. No, Jude. We'll move off it. But I wish now that I had a different mentality. But Jude, it was foisted on you. It was
Oh,
compulsory.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
if you, by the way, you could have got 9 honours in your leaving cert, but if you failed Irish, you failed the exam, which was ridiculous.
Oh, absurd, absolutely absurd. See, the poor people who taught it, they were so keen to make sure it would work, it would stick to people,
Yeah,
that they beat the hell out of them one way or another. So make
absolutely.
it compulsory
Yeah,
and thump them from time to time, and they failed
yeah.
in both counts. Okay, let's move on to the modern world, Pat. Leave aside all these old leprechaun languages and stuff, as Sammy Wilson put it once, and
Yeah.
let's talk about smartphones, because I think it is that woman, Breda O'Brien, who is talking about her
Well, it
daughter.
was a woman called Jennifer O'Connell.
Oh, very good. Oh, God, you're sharp. I just did that deliberately to give you a chance to feel good. Correct me. So,
Just in case Brenda O'Brien rings you up and complains.
Breda O'Brien. Breda O'Brien.
Right, O'Brien, okay.
So, what's the right age to this woman? As a headline is, what's the right age for my daughter to get a smartphone? I asked her older siblings. So, she talks about in general, that thing about the asking the siblings only comes in at the end. But in general, she was asking, should kids be given a smartphone at the age of 12, 13, and even earlier, as is common? And I'd say most people would say no. Most people are very nervous about the negative effect it's having on children and how they're depressed and God knows what. Do you think that's true, or is that a load of hooey?
Well, O'Connell claims that there's a whole plethora of data and so on. It says, and she's claiming that there's actually backable up that the mental health of kids has declined at quite a rate since the introduction of smartphones. That years ago, kids went out and played football. And they came home, threw their school bag in the door, and out to the park to play with their friends. Now they come home, shut the door, and go up to their room, and apparently they're hot wired to this technology and their games and whatever. But there's very little social, and and the reaction they've stopped learning to deal with it. So I don't know how to. But
Do you think that's true,
O'Connell
Pat?
said,
Do you think, would
there's
you?
an element of truth, Jude. Jude, there's definitely an element of truth that because it's see it in my own family. Jude, when I was a young fella and living in County, of course, it was a different era, obviously. But I lived in a place called Ardcolumcille, and quite literally, when we came home from school, we just threw in the books or the bag, and we'll say, right, meet you in 10 minutes over, and there's a wee sort of green area, and we'd meet there, and we'd play football for 40 minutes or half an hour, and then go and maybe do whatever we had to do.
Mm. Okay, allow me to be a steer for a moment or two then. This is
You're
a
never
different...
going to forgive Jim Sharkey for that, eh?
You were when you were a kid, that was long before smartphones and a lot of
Yeah,
other stuff. I remember reading this. You probably come across it yourself when you were studying media, but there was a
yeah,
theory that each generation of adults is very fearful of any new technology that comes in and
yeah,
it's affecting their
absolutely.
children. And I remember the time when horror comics were really, oh God, the stuff they're putting in youngsters' heads. I remember the time that movies, oh, a movie? It's that no, the things that they do on that screen. It's, I remember the local kids standing outside one of the cinemas to see what Catholics were coming out of. What was it? Room at the Top. And then they had what was it? Videos. And then they had
And then
TV, goggle-eyed
television,
TV.
television.
Television, the curse of the, and just sitting there like morons. And we would have been out playing. And now that they're actually interacting with the internet, we're saying, oh, this is the end, that we're finished. I just think there is a tendency for each generation to a certain extent to romanticize things when they were young because they were different and because they're long ago. And we tend to remember our childhood and our young days in a kind of a gentle golden glow. And the second thing is, I would take a bit of persuading that these phones are damaging kids. And one of the things as a teacher that I found very hard was an English teacher, was to get kids to write. Jesus, they hated writing. They really hated it. And yet, what do they do with their phones? They're texting all the time. And you might say, oh, look, they don't put the full stops in the right place. That's the table manners of writing. It's getting kids to write in the first place. So I don't understand why schools don't harness it yet again. Harness this drive, these possibilities these phones have, and use them for their own ends, educational ends. I think I mentioned that to you one time before when you told me that actually it was
absolutely,
a bit of a pipe dream, really. It'd be too many difficulties attached to it. Would that be right?
I Jude, like I know my eldest son, he's a vice principal at school, and he was telling me there's a real problem with phones. Kids, onto the desk, sort of texting, and then of course there's all the social problems and so on. Maybe inappropriate images and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure. I can't sort of. But here's the thing. I think most schools should have a policy during the day. Kids shouldn't have their phones in school. I really genuinely believe that. And if there's an emergency, the parents could ring the school like the old days and just sort of say, "Look, I want to speak to Seamus, or I want to speak to Mary, or whatever the hell it is," and so on. And it shouldn't be a big issue. And then on the evenings, if the kids want to go on their phones and play their games and use their technology, fair enough. Jude, but there's one thing I do know. I've seen it in my own grandkids. They do spend an inordinate amount of time on the games and all that. There could be I watched me one of my grandchildren, Noah. He's only about 6, and this game called, I think it's called Minecraft. And it's all about building things.
My grandson.
And it's all about building things. And you should hear him talking about, Granda, I can do this and I do this, and then I can build this, and it's all about perception and space and all. I think it's actually. I'm not an expert. I'm not an educationalist, but I would think it expands the brain brilliantly for a kid.
Oh, absolutely. And that's an example of something that wasn't educationalists that worked on that. It was just a commercial venture that produced that game. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I mean, people who are adept in these things should use their brains and come up with a list of things where it could be helpful. In the meantime, I would have no problem with schools simply saying, yeah, as you've suggested, no phones in our school. I mean, let them look at their phones after or look at their phones before school. But most kids would accept that, They really would. Yeah. I mean, stop and think about it. Kids accept the fact in many schools that they have to wear the exact same clothes as the other kids in the classroom. Yeah. Exact same. Yeah. Girls as well as boys. So, if I think in some ways I know this is very right wing, but it's not a bad thing to be firm with kids and to deny kids a certain amount of things due to the fact that they're kids. I think that continually pandering, oh God, I sound awful, don't I? Continually pandering to children's wishes. I've always found it a little bit, I don't know, sort of, it's adults demeaning themselves almost. Do you feel any of that?
No, I agree. I would agree. I would agree with you, Judah. There's that's. I think that's true. And by the way, see, when you're a child, you don't appreciate it, but see, when you're an adult, you sort of say that was no bad idea. You know, being denied something, Jude, because that's like life. You know, I remember a man saying, you know, people don't agree with selection, and he says, "But I might fancy Miss World. She doesn't fancy me, so geez, that's selection."
Well, I suppose that brings down to the basic problem. We're very short in time now. The basic problem where education should prepare you for the world out there, or whether education should shield you from the world out there until you're ready to face it. Which of the
Do
two?
you believe you're the educationalist here, not me?
I don't
What do you
know.
believe?
Yeah, I tell you, I'll put my cards on the table. I think that schools should equip you, train you, make you ready for the world outside, rather than to close you off in a kind of a hothouse. I think that has been tried, and I think it has in many instances failed badly. So that's the end of that.
No, you know, I suppose in everything in life, Jude, you know, like people like me, I would have loved to have been taught how to cook, how to change the oil in my car, how to do all these things.
Yeah.
No, Greek and Latin was great and algebra, but I've never used them since.
Good point. Good point. Okay, Pat. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom. Okay, all the best. Look out for the immigrants.
Bye, Jude. Good luck. Good luck to the immigrants as well. Bye, Jude.